Today, we will explore the most abundant living beings on our planet, the microorganisms. Since the beginning of life, they have been around and are found in every corner of the earth. Let's start this journey by learning about the diversity of the tree of life. At the base of this Pecopteris fossil, a plant inhabits northern Chile, we can see the last common universal ancestors of all living beings, also called LUCA. In the most basal branches, we first have bacteria, which are the most abundant living organisms. We talk about this group most of the time when we refer to microorganisms. On the other hand, we have Archaea. Archaea were thought to be extreme bacteria due to their apparent similarity. However, we know that they are evolutionarily very different. In fact, Archaea is more similar to Eukarya. This latter domain comprises more complex organisms and cells with compartments. Here, we find fungi, where there are just a microscopic fungi. In the end, the plants and animals appear, and in this small branch are the humans. Every branch is essential because it represents a species that lives and has lived on our planet. Most of life is in the microscopic form. Our planet is based on microorganisms. The second tree represents bacteriophages, viruses that infect bacteria. Viruses are very diverse, and although they are not living beings, they are part of our microscopic world. Microorganisms have been the first form of life on our planet. They appeared millions of years ago and continue to be the basis of all life as we know it today. There is no sunlight on the deep sea, thousands of meters below sea level. In these remote places, there are hydrothermal vents. They are characterized by a high concentration of minerals, salts, high temperature, and pressure. These particular and extreme conditions probably produced the first organic molecules and biological entity billions of years ago, enabling the leap from a non-living to a microscopic living world. These microorganisms were able to adapt to new environments. They expand throughout the water column, other marine places, and even the surface. Their adaptation allowed, for example, to start oxygen production. In fact, most of the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean, produced by microorganisms like cyanobacteria and microalgae. And although they gave way to new, more complex organisms with more cells, such as animals and plants, we could not exist without microorganisms. Our world is microbial. Microorganisms coexisting with us are called the microbiome. We found them inside and around our bodies since the beginning of our life. The microbiome is dynamic and unique to each person. It is our invisible fingerprint. This microbial bond is connected to the place we live, with whom we live, our ethnic origin, gender, sexual identity, diet, and lifestyle. In general, our life and decisions shapes our microbiome. Our microbiome is not evenly distributed throughout the body. For example, the skin microbiome is the one that changes the most in our body because it is in direct contact with the surrounding environment. The best non-microbiome is the intestinal one, also called bacterial flora. It houses the most abundant and diverse community, helping to break down food, allowing us to absorb the nutrients, such as fiber. Similar occur in our skin, where there are bacteria that with sunlight help us to absorb vitamin D. Our microbiome also changes over time. When we are in more active and sociable periods, our microbiome diversifies. However, in periods of stress, anxiety, and loneliness, our microbiome decreases its diversity, also influenced by related chemical signs. Inspired by the sculpture called End of the Desert, located near Antofagasta, we can see the relationship in our body between human cells in yellow and microbial cells in purple. It is estimated that there are 30 microbial cells for 10 human cells. We do not see this since they are microscopic, weighing between 200 grams and up to a kilo. Our relationship with microorganisms begins when we are born. The first years of life are key for establishing our microbiome. During breastfeeding, the milk delivers the nutrients and defenses necessary for the strong and healthy growth of the baby. Further, it provides key microorganisms that will become part of its intestinal microbiome. It is crucial to consider the microbiome in this stage because if breastfeeding is not possible, the mother has to find another way to provide the necessary microorganisms to the newborn. Microorganisms are not present only in the close bond of love between relatives. They are also present in an intimate relationship. This painting describes how microbiomes relate when we are in a relationship. For example, each person has a microbiome with their color. When we start to share more time with the other person, our microbiome becomes more and more similar to the point of coexistence. Although we do not stop being who we are, we reach a balance. If a couple breaks up, the microbiome slowly returns to the initial individual point, even though a little bit of the other person remains. Microorganisms that settle down on surfaces are called biofilms. A healthy or balanced biofilm is characterized by its high diversity. If an unwanted microorganism arrives, like this pathogen in yellow, the microbial community of this biofilm changes. The diversity decreases and other microorganisms appear. Here is when our microbiome becomes unbalanced and we feel bad. In this case, we have to visit a medical doctor who will give us antibiotics represented as these little copper balls. It is crucial to consume antibiotics only by a doctor's indication and following the stipulated dose and time. Do not self-medicate, as this pathogen could become resistant to antibiotic if not appropriately ingested. The scientific community is currently investigating methods other than antibiotics to deal with microbial infections. Considering that it takes about a year for the microbiome to recover from antibiotic treatment, we should consume it only when strictly necessary. To heal and strengthen our microbiome, we can consume prebiotics and probiotics. As a fertilizer for plants, prebiotics, for example, rich fiber fruits and vegetables, contain nutrients that help our microbiome. Probiotics are live microorganisms that, when consumed, help those that are already there to become stronger. For example, yogurt contains a bacteria called lactobacillus. Probiotics can also be found in naturally fermented foods such as sauerkraut, pickles, kimchi, and kombucha. Talking about pathogens, we must mention a virus that is not part of our microbiome, the SARS-CoV-2, which causes the COVID-19 disease. This virus is part of the coronavirus family, whose capsid or envelope structure is characterized by several proteins giving them a crown shape. The key protein is the spike, which is characteristic of this specific virus. We can recognize this protein using methods such as PCR. The genetic material, in this case RNA, is found inside the viral particle. RNA contains the instructions to produce proteins that make up this viral particle. There are currently 5 vaccines in circulation in Chile, with 3 different action methods. All of these are safe and effective in protecting us from COVID-19. The Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, and CanSino vaccines use a viral vector, which contain the capsid or cover of an adenovirus, another family of viruses, with the genetic material of SARS-CoV-2 to produce the spike protein. Thus, it acts as disguise so that the body recognizes as the real one. The Cyanobacter Vaccine uses the inactivated virus with its key proteins, but without genetic material. In this way, if the body receives this vaccine, and since it is not part of our microbiome, it is recognized as suspicious and reacts against it. It does not have genetic material, therefore, it cannot proliferate or multiply. Consequently, it is effective and safe. The third type of vaccine is from Pfizer, which uses RNA but not the one seen in the diagram. The genetic material contains the information to produce proteins such as the capsid. In this context, the vaccine contains a messenger RNA that gives the information to produce the spike protein so that the body can recognize it and react against infection. The lifetime of messenger RNA is very short, long enough to notify the production of a protein. Since this RNA does not last long or reproduce, it is safe and effective. Getting vaccinated doesn't mean that we will never get infected. The vaccine will better prepare our bodies against severe infection. It will be more manageable with milder symptoms. In addition, we will have the less viral load in our body, also protecting the people around us. Since there is now 100% foolproof prevention method, we must use several methods that cover the shortcoming of the other. Above all, there is vaccination, followed by the physical distance, so our microorganisms exchange as little as possible. Ventilation is key to renewing the air that could contain this virus. Wear a mask correctly over the nose and mouth to filter the air and prevent the escape of microdroplets that could include this virus. Wash your hands with soap and water or with 70% alcohol. Monitor yourself, and if you have any symptoms, perform screening tests such as PCR or the FAST test. Keep our social bubble small and well connected. Tell each other if you feel symptoms. Finally, maintain the cleaning and disinfection of surfaces. Pandemics and epidemics have been throughout our history. In these quarantines, our microbiome probably decreases, which is not necessarily bad. It is only a reflection of our external changes that also have consequences. We take care of ourselves to prevent SARS-CoV-2 from entering our ecosystem, and your microbiome is also making an effort. The relationship with our microbiome is close and dynamic. One of these dynamic relationships, for example, in this painting, is the brain microbiome gut axis. The nerve connection of our brain reach throughout our body, including our intestine. Here, chemical signals are released and our microbiome receives it, reacts, and release other chemical signals. Such signals also reach our brain and respond to it. This close relationship is proposed to be considered as an organ of the human body. It's important in the closeness with our human side, the absorption of nutrients, and this great teamwork is proof that we relate as an ecosystem. Lately, progress has been made on this subject. However, there is still much to investigate, especially in our territories. Our relationship with microorganisms is very close. Thanks to them, we can breathe, even absorb our nutrients. We couldn't live without them. Since we are born as individuals and species, we are closely related to the microbial world. We are not at war against microorganisms. We have explored different ways of relating to microorganisms as a whole, an ecosystem. It is essential to reflect on how we relate to our environment. The narratives of our languages have an important role. Why is war declared on human pathogens and not on non-food plant pathogens? No invisible enemies attacking us. Although there are pathogens, they represent only a very small part of our great tree of life. Metaphors can be a great tool to understand new concepts. However, word metaphor generates erroneous and stigmatizing perception of species such as microorganisms. Our world is microbial, and we are part of this world. The human body and microorganisms are related from the beginning of our life. They are not our enemies. If we take care of our microbiome, we also care for ourselves. We are an ecosystem.